I found the list 2 weeks after my father's funeral, folded inside his wallet, a piece of paper so worn the creases had nearly torn through. The wallet had been sitting in a box with the rest of his belongings, things I'd been avoiding sorting through because looking at his reading glasses and old receipts felt too final. But that Tuesday evening I finally opened the box, and I found 10 things my father wished he'd done before he died. 10 dreams he'd carried in his pocket for years but never acted on. 10 regrets written in fading ink. At the bottom, hidden behind a fold I almost didn't notice, was an 11th item. And when I read it, I understood that this list wasn't just about him. It was a warning. Before we dive in, have you ever discovered something after someone died that completely changed how you understood them? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories about honoring the dreams of those we've lost and finding your own path in life, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now let me tell you about how the craziest year of my life began. When my father died, I was 30 years old and living exactly the life he'd lived. Same kind of job, financial analyst at a firm in Boston, crunching numbers I didn't care about for people I'd never meet. Same kind of existence. Safe, stable, suffocating. My father, Robert, died of a heart attack at 58. Sudden. No warning. He'd been working late on a Saturday, because he always worked late, always said yes to overtime, always chose the office over everything else. They found him slumped over his desk, calculator still in hand. At his funeral, person after person said the same thing. He was so dedicated, such a hard worker, never complained. What they meant was, he just worked. And then he died. I didn't cry at the funeral. I felt numb, hollowed out. Not because I'd lost my father, but because I'd never really had him. He'd been present but absent my whole life. Physically there, emotionally elsewhere. A good provider. A distant parent. A man who existed in the margins of his own life. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was alone in my apartment, staring at the box of his belongings my mother had given me. "You should have some of his things," she'd said. "He would have wanted that." But I didn't want his things. I didn't want his watch that still smelled like him, or his reading glasses with the scratched lenses, or his wallet with the cracked leather. I opened the wallet anyway. Inside, expired insurance card, ATM receipts from 3 years ago, a photo of me at my college graduation, folded so many times it was nearly illegible, a piece of notebook paper. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was old, the ink faded, but the handwriting was unmistakably my father's. Neat, precise, the handwriting of someone who never did anything carelessly. At the top, things to do before I die. Theo. Below it, a numbered list. See the Northern Lights, Iceland or Norway, learn to play piano. At least one song perfectly. Tell Mom the truth about why I left medical school. Forgive James sleep under the stars in the desert. New Mexico dance at a real jazz club. New Orleans. Write the book I always talked about, swim in the ocean at midnight. Take the road trip with no destination. Just drive. Tell someone I love them before it's too late. I stared at the list for a long time. My father had carried this in his wallet. For how long? Years, probably, maybe decades. Carrying around dreams he never pursued. Reminders of a life he never lived. And then I noticed something. The bottom of the paper had an extra fold. A section tucked under. Hidden. I unfolded it. Item 11. Written in the same handwriting but darker. Pressed harder into the paper. Like he'd written it with more urgency. Make sure my son doesn't make the same mistakes I did. Make sure he lives. I read it 3 times. Then I folded the paper carefully, put it back in the wallet, and sat there in my apartment, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. My father had known. He'd known he was wasting his life. And he'd written this list as a way to remember what he was sacrificing. But he'd never done any of it. He'd just carried the list, year after year, a catalog of regrets. And the worst part, the part that made my hands shake, was that I was doing the exact same thing. I hated my job. I'd stopped writing, stories, essays, anything creative, 8 years ago because I didn't have enough free time. I lived in the same kind of beige apartment my father had lived in. I worked the same kind of soul-crushing job. I was 30 years old and already following his exact path toward a life of quiet desperation. Item 11 was a warning. A desperate plea from a man who'd realized too late that he'd wasted his one chance. I looked at the list again. 10 things he'd wished he'd done, and I made a decision that felt equal parts crazy and necessary. I was going to do them, all of them, for him and for me. I'd never made a decision so fast as this. The first item was see the Northern Lights, Iceland or Norway. I'd never traveled alone, never traveled anywhere that wasn't a work conference or a family obligation, but 3 days after finding the list, I bought a plane ticket to Reykjavik. Jessica thought I was having a breakdown when I told her, "You're going to Iceland? Now? Your father just died and you've never traveled anywhere alone. Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm not okay, but I need to do this." She sat down next to me. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. To be fair, my life was not that beige only because of her. She made everything brighter. But I always felt I wasn't worthy of her. I didn't give her everything she deserved. She deserved a person that was whole. But she knew me better than anyone, and she could see something had shifted. "The list your father left. You're really going to do all of it?" "I have to. He carried these dreams for decades and never acted on them. I don't want to be 58 and carrying my own list of regrets. I love you, you know that, right? I know, and I'm worried, not because I don't support this, but because you've been living on autopilot for so long, and suddenly you're booking trips to Iceland and talking about quitting your job. I just want to make sure you're not running away from something." "I'm not running away. I'm finally running towards something. I just don't know what yet." She kissed my forehead. "Okay, go. Find whatever you need to find. I'll be here when you get back." I requested vacation time from HR and left the following week. Iceland in February was brutal, dark, cold, wind that cut through every layer. I joined a Northern Lights tour group, a dozen strangers crammed into a van driving through frozen nothing, chasing lights that might not even appear. The guide was a woman named Solveig, maybe 40, who spoke English with a lilting accent and didn't sugarcoat anything. "Sometimes we see nothing," she said. "Sometimes we drive for hours and the sky stays dark. But we try anyway." We drove for 2 hours into the countryside, away from city lights, stopping at a place so dark I couldn't see my own hand. We stood outside, freezing, waiting, hoping, and then, slowly, the sky started to change. Green ribbons of light appeared, faint at first, then brighter, dancing, swirling, colors that didn't seem real, green, purple, hints of pink. Like the sky was alive. Everyone around me gasped, pulled out phones, started taking photos. But I just stood there, watching, feeling something crack open inside my chest. My father had wanted to see this, had written it on a list he carried for years, but he'd never come. He'd told himself, someday, and someday had never arrived. Next to me, a woman was crying. Not sad crying, overwhelmed crying. She was older, maybe 65, traveling alone. "Are you okay?" I asked. She wiped her eyes, smiled. "My husband and I were supposed to come here together. He died 6 months ago. We always said we'd do this trip someday. We had a list of places we wanted to go, but we kept putting it off. There was always a reason to wait. And then he got sick, and suddenly there was no more time." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She looked at the lights above us. "I came here alone because I couldn't stand the thought of never seeing this, of waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. Was it your dream too?" "My father's. He had a list of things he wanted to do. This was number 1. He never did any of them." The woman turned to look at me. "And you're doing them for him?" "I'm trying." "That's beautiful. But remember to do them for yourself too. Don't just complete his list. Make your own, while you still can." Her name was Ingrid. She was from Germany, and she'd spent 6 months since her husband's death traveling to every place they'd talked about visiting. "I'm angry at him," she said as we drove back to Reykjavik. "For waiting, for thinking we had time, but I'm angrier at myself, because I waited too. We both did, and now I'm doing all of this alone. Do you regret coming?" "Not for a second. I regret not coming sooner. I regret every time we said next year, or when we have more money, or after we retire. But I don't regret finally doing it. Even alone, even sad, because at least I'm living, even if it hurts." Jessica was waiting for me at the airport to pick me up. "How was it?" she asked after I kissed her. Jet-lagged and exhausted. Life-changing. Terrifying. I met this woman whose husband died before they could travel together. She said they kept waiting for the right time and it never came. Jessica was quiet. "And now you're thinking about us?" "I'm thinking about everything. About how I hate my job. About how I've stopped writing. About how I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my own life. And you're the best part of my life, Jess. You're the only thing that feels real. But I can't be a good partner when I don't even know who I am." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to figure myself out, and I don't know what that looks like yet. But I need you to know. This isn't about you. It's about me. About becoming someone I don't hate." She took my hand. "Then do it. Complete the list. Quit the job if you need to. Figure out who you are. I'm not going anywhere. But Theo, don't lose yourself trying to find your father." Next day, I quit my job. I didn't have a plan, didn't have another position lined up. I just walked into my boss's office and said I was done. He looked at me like I was insane. "Done? What do you mean, done?" "I mean, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm 30 years old and I hate waking up every morning. So I'm leaving." "To do what?" "I don't know yet." I went home. He looked at the list. Item 2. Learn to play piano. At least one song perfectly. I found a teacher through a local music school. His name was Vincent, and he was 73 years old with arthritis in his hands and more enthusiasm about music than anyone I'd ever met. "How long have you been teaching?" I asked during our first lesson. 3 years. "And before that?" "I was a bank clerk for 45 years, hated every second. Then I retired, and my wife said, 'Vincent, you've been talking about giving piano lessons since we met. Either do it, or stop talking about it.' So I did it. Best decision I ever made." "You started teaching at 70? Why not?" "I was going to turn 70 whether I teach piano or not. Might as well turn 70 and be able to teach someone how to play Chopin." Over the next 3 months, Vincent taught me to play one song perfectly, Clair de Lune, by Debussy. It was hard. My fingers were clumsy. I made the same mistakes over and over. But slowly, I got better. And one Tuesday evening, I played the entire piece without a single error. Vincent cried. Actually cried. "That was beautiful, Theo. Your father would have been proud. He never learned to play." "I know, you told me. But you did. That's what matters." During one of our lessons, Vincent said something that stayed with me. "Your father's list. It's full of regrets. Things he wished he'd done. But Theo, you're 30. You don't have regrets yet. You have time. Don't wait until your father's age to start living." How do I know what I'm supposed to do? You don't. That's the point. You try things. Some work, some don't. But at least you're trying. At least you're not insisting on doing the things you already know you hate, wondering where your life went. I started writing again. Stories I'd abandoned years ago. New ideas. Terrible first drafts. It didn't matter. I was creating again. I was trying. Item 3. Tell Mom the truth about why I left medical school. I didn't even know my father had been in medical school. He'd been an accountant my entire life, but the list said, "Tell Mom." And the only mom that made sense was my grandmother. My father's mother. who was 81 and still sharp as ever. I drove to her house in Providence. She made tea and sat with me in the living room. "Did Dad ever talk to you about medical school?" Her face changed. "Not in 40 years. Why?" "I found a list he wrote. He said he wanted to tell you the truth about why he left." She set down her tea. "He told me he left because he didn't like it, that he realized medicine wasn't for him." "That's not what happened, is it?" She was quiet for a long time. "No. He left because your mother was pregnant. They weren't married. It was 1985, different time. He needed money immediately, so he dropped out, got a job, did the responsible thing, and he resented it for the rest of his life." "He resented me?" "No. Never you. He resented the choice. Resented that he'd given up his dream before even trying. But he never said it out loud, just carried it quietly, like he carried everything. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because it wasn't my story to tell, and because your father asked me not to. He didn't want you to feel guilty for something that wasn't your fault." But I did feel guilty, and angry, and sad, because my father had sacrificed his dream for me and then spent the rest of his life quietly bitter about it. And I'd never known. "Grandma, did he ever seem happy?" She thought about it. "In moments, when you were very small, before work consumed him. But mostly, no. He wasn't happy. He was resigned." "I didn't want to be resigned. I didn't want to sacrifice dreams and then carry resentment for decades. I didn't want to wake up one day and realize I'd wasted my life being responsible instead of alive." Item 4. Forgive James. I had no idea who James was. My father had never mentioned a brother, but I asked my mother, "James, your father's brother?" "Dad had a brother?" "Had. They stopped speaking before you were born. Some kind of argument. Money, I think. Or maybe it was something else. Your father never talked about him." "Do you know where he is?" "Last I heard, Colorado. But that was 25 years ago." It took me 2 weeks to track down James Merrick. He was 62, living in a small city, working as a carpenter. I called him. "Who is this?" "I'm Theo, Robert's son." Silence. Then, "How did you find my number?" "I don't want to talk to Robert." "You couldn't. He died 3 months ago." More silence. "I'm sorry to hear that." "He left a list of things he wished he'd done. One of them was forgiving you. I'm trying to understand why." "You don't need to understand. It was between us." "Please. I'm trying to complete his list. I need to know." He sighed. "We fought over our father's inheritance. Stupid, petty stuff. I said things I shouldn't have. So did he. And instead of apologizing, we just stopped talking. I moved out, distanced myself from the whole family, even Mom. 25 years of silence over something that didn't even matter." "Did you want to reconcile?" "No." "Well, some days. But pride is a hell of a thing. And then enough time passes that reaching out feels impossible. And then you hear your brother died and you realize you'll never get the chance." We talked for 2 hours. About my father. About regrets. About how stupid it is to hold grudges. By the end, James was crying. "I should have called him," he said. "Years ago, I should have just picked up the phone. He should have called you, too." "Maybe, but now neither of us can." "You still can call Grandma. She will be thrilled to hear from you." Before we hung up, James said, "Theo, don't be like us." I thought about friends I'd lost to stupid arguments, ex-girlfriends I'd never apologized to, people I'd cut out of my life over things that didn't matter, and I started making calls, texts, emails, awkward conversations that needed to happen. Not all of them went well, but some did, and even the ones that didn't, at least I tried. At least I wouldn't reach 60 wondering what if. Item 5. Sleep under the stars in the desert. New Mexico. I'd never been camping, never spent a night outside, but I drove to New Mexico, rented gear I barely knew how to use, and found a spot in the middle of nowhere. It was terrifying. The silence, the darkness, the awareness of how small I was, but it was also the most peaceful I'd ever felt. I lay on my back, staring up at more stars than I'd ever seen, and I thought about my father, about how he'd spent his life in offices with fluorescent lights, about how he'd never taken time to just be, to exist without purpose or productivity. And I understood something. My father hadn't died at 58. He'd stopped living long before that. Maybe at 25 when he'd dropped out of medical school. Maybe at 30 when he'd realized he hated his job but felt trapped. Maybe at 40 when he'd stopped pretending he'd ever change. The heart attack had just made it official. I didn't want that. I didn't want to die while I was still alive. I wanted to feel things, do things, make mistakes and try again. Items 6 through 9 happened fast. New Orleans for jazz. Dancing badly but freely in a club that smelled like bourbon and sweat. Finding my father's old notebooks and finishing the novel he'd started 40 years ago. Swimming in the ocean at midnight off the coast of North Carolina. Terrified and exhilarated. Driving with no destination for 2 weeks. Meeting strangers. Sleeping in my car. Feeling lost and found at the same time. Each item taught me something. Each person I met showed me a different way to live. And slowly, I stopped being the person my father had been. I started being someone else, someone who chose experiences over security, someone who said yes instead of someday. Item 10. Tell someone I love them before it's too late. My father had written this but never done it. I didn't want to make the same mistake. During the last few months, I learned how to do it more. I've already told my mother, my grandmother, some old friends. I told them I loved them. It was awkward. Some of them didn't know how to respond. But I didn't care, because one day I'd be gone and I wanted them to know. And finally, still miles away from home, I called Jessica. "How's the jazz club?" she asked. "Incredible. I danced, badly, but I danced," she laughed. "I wish I could see that." "I wish you were there." "I know, but this is something you needed to do alone." "How are you feeling?" "Different. Lighter. Like I'm becoming someone I was always supposed to be but forgot about." "Good. That's what I want for you." "Jess, I love you. I'm not saying it just because of the list. I really feel it. You know, I've never been the warmest person. Saying things as, 'I love you' is no simple for me, as it wasn't for my father. But it's the truth. I love you." I could hear her smile through the phone. "I love you too." To complete my journey, I did the only thing my father did, in fact. I made my own list. 10 things I wanted to do. But not someday. Now. I drove back home. Not to my place, but Jessica's. "I'm done," I said as she opened the door. "With a list?" "With a list, with running, with searching. I think I found what I was looking for." "What was it?" "Permission. To live differently than my father did. To choose experiences over security. To be someone who tries instead of someone who waits. And now? Now I come home. To you, if you'll still have me. Theo, I never let you go. You know that, right? This whole time, I was just waiting for you to find yourself so we could actually start building a life together. Not the life we were supposed to want. The one we actually want. We started planning. Not a wedding. Not yet. But a life. One that looked nothing like the one we'd been sleepwalking toward. I started freelance writing. We traveled together, not to complete anyone's list, but to make our own memories. We took risks. We failed sometimes. We tried again. And our relationship, which had been good, comfortable, safe, became something more. It became alive, because I was finally alive. And when two people are actually living, actually present, actually themselves, that's when love stops being just comfortable and starts being real. A year later, we got married. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. No fancy venue, just us, choosing each other, awake this time, fully conscious of what we were promising. At the reception, I gave a speech about my father, about the list he'd carried but never completed, about how his death had forced me to wake up before it was too late. "My father taught me something without meaning to," I said. "He taught me that you can love someone and still lose yourself, that you can build a good life and still be miserable, that you can do everything right and still have regrets." So Jess and I are choosing differently. We're choosing to build a life that's awake, that's intentional, that's ours, not because it looks good to other people, but because it feels real to us. Jessica squeezed my hand. "I didn't marry the person you were before," she whispered. "I married the person you became, the one who's finally alive. My father died at 58 carrying a list of regrets in his wallet. But because of that list, because of his final desperate plea for me to live differently, I'm 31 and finally awake. Finally myself, finally able to be the partner Jessica deserves because I'm finally the person I was supposed to be. And that's the greatest gift he ever gave me. Not just the list, but the warning, the permission, the push I needed to stop existing and start living. Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to refuse to make their mistakes, to live the life they wished they'd lived, to be brave enough to change course before it's too late. My father never got that chance, but I did, and I'm not wasting it. Have you ever discovered something after someone died that completely changed how you understood them? Or realized you were living someone else's life instead of your own? Share your story in the comments below. If this story about living before it's too late, honoring those we've lost by not making their mistakes, and finding yourself by completing someone else's dreams touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more meaningful stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next thought-provoking tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.